first, we have a guest that was just on Rupley.
Yes.
And go ahead.
I'm going to bring him in. So last week, the little guy shook the shit out of Wall Street when a group of Redditors called WallStreetBets used the power of unity to band together and drive up the price of several stocks by buying targeted companies that were overshorted by select hedge funds. This information's all out there, fam. These Redditors were playing by the rules. However, they were shut down when certain apps, in particular Robinhood, pulled the plug on their plan by only allowing their customers to sell the stock, not buy it, fam, essentially nosediving the recently inflated stock, while hedge funds, they were able to go in there and recover their lost funds. Shortly after the scenario, a young man by the name of Gavin Mario Wax of the New York Young Republicans rebooted the once leftist movement, Occupy Wall Street. He is here with us today to talk about what transpired from a week ago and what's going on now. We want to welcome to the show, Gavin Mario Wax. Sorry.
Jeez.
I love the emphasis on my middle name, but thank you guys for having me.
Well, when you're on a show with a guy named Pasta and Fiorella, you're going to get that Mario, and you're going to pull it out of you and stuff like that.
I was gonna say, I love the synergy here of all the names coming together. It's like a real nice. It's either a nice Italian dish or restaurant. I'm not sure.
I know, right? Mario, Pasta, Fee, and Johnny sat down in an Italian restaurant. Who orders first? They all ordered together. Anyways, where are you from originally, and what are you all about? I saw you on Rupley. We saw you on a couple news conferences, press conferences, whatnot. I was really excited when I saw the Occupy Wall Street movement rebooted. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got involved with all this.
I'm originally from here in the city. I'm from Queens, born and raised. I went to school here in the city, and now I'm involved in politics. I do it on the side, obviously, running my club. I'm a populist Republican, so I think it's a different breed than what most people may be used to. That's why I think we raised a lot of eyebrows when it was a Republican group organizing down at Zuccotti Park. But I think we're part of a new realignment in politics, and I think some people who are observing things kind of on the ground and who are observing things more astutely, they realize that there's some changes going on in the American body politic, and that's why a lot of people are a little confused about our rally. But I think it was a great show of unity, and I'm here with you guys today, so I think it's the beginning of something great. So I'm really excited. Yeah,
a young Republican on a leftist show coming on to talk about some stuff, about something we always talk about. He's from Queens, fam, so let me explain to you, fam. He's an Islanders fan. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
Yeah.
Go Barzy. He's a Jet fan.
I don't want to talk about that, but yeah.
Hey, we got.
You're building up to something. You're building up to something.
Yeah. Well, we have the Knicks fan probably. Maybe you might be a Nets fan, but probably a Knicks fan, right?
Knicks, yeah.
But the fourth one we're going to talk about, fam, is the one I've been telling you. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. We're both Mets fans here. I'm from Long Island. He's from Queens. That's Mets territory. But Stephen Cohen was involved in this over here. So right out of the gate, how do you feel about the Mets? Are you going to protest this year or what?
Well, first, I knew you were not from California the second I got on here, because I was like, this guy does not sound like he's from California. But I'm glad you said Long Island. And as far as the Mets, I'm protesting them every year. It's nothing new. This is just more reason to protest. But Steve Cohen, what a clown! What a clown! Who buys a team like the Mets unless you're looking for clout? And he buys it for clout, and then within a few days of this Reddit story blowing up, he's jumping off Twitter because he can't take the heat.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a tragic figure in some ways, but I don't really feel that bad for him.
Yeah, it's a shame that we had to go from Will Palm and the Bernie Madoff scam to this scam. So yeah,
well, that's actually a good point. I think the Mets have been involved in every major financial scandal the last 20 years.
So, we're on the left primarily, and I know you were going through our Twitter and stuff, and probably watching what we say. We're a little bit of a different breed. We talk to people that are on the opposite ideologies. We talk to everybody under the sun. And one of the things that I've been noticing is that there is a fractioning on our end, on the left, between people who are who think that everybody on the right is a white supremacist Nazi, and then people who understand like there are different beliefs and not everybody is that, and like there is an affected population in America right now that is directly being economically affected by a very powerful ruling class. And that is existent both on the left and right, because that is a top-down paradigm. It's not a left-right paradigm. So I want to know how exactly the Redditors pulled this off, meaning how did they know to go after these certain stocks? And how did they get so many people on board with this plan? People across political ideologies, people of all different kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we saw one of the largest transfers of wealth in probably the last 100 years. It was a fantastic example of collective action working for successfully. And this has been brewing for a while. I think you could go back all the way to 2019, where there was some, legitimate discussions on stocks saying, GameStop was maybe a little undervalued. They're having a new CEO. There's some things in the works that's going to probably push the stock higher. And then I think once information started to come out about how overshorted this stock was, particularly after COVID had hit and a lot of issues in the market started to arise, AMC was one of the other stocks that got hit hard by these overshorts. I think it merged into less of a financial gain type of thing and more into like, oh, this is a principled, we're making a stand, they're overshorting, let's stick it to them. We'll also make some money while we're doing it. It's a win all around. And they were able to really drive this price up over the last, few weeks, few months. And it's done more to rattle the establishment, institutional wealth, concentrations of wealth and power in our country than really anything in a while. I think they lost something, like I said, $70 billion. And they're using the entire force of corporate America, the state, to basically vilify a bunch of anonymous guys and girls on Reddit buying some stock in their free time. I mean, it's really a joke. They're really trying to flip the David Goliath story on its head. But the price went up. And these arrogant hedge funds, they didn't do anything. I mean, when it hit $40, they were already kind of screwed. But they only really started to shit their pants once it hit $400. And then they're calling all their favors. They're calling all for their friends to come bail them out. So I think it was a mix of arrogance and incompetence on their part. And you can see them self-projecting their insecurities when they go on CNBC or wherever, and they call these guys unsophisticated. They call them mediocre. They call them amateur, which is kind of hilarious considering these guys just bankrupted multiple hedge funds. So obviously they know what they're doing. So maybe you should pay them some creed, pay them some attention, because they brought you on your knees. So, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, is there a leader of the group? Is there a mastermind, somebody who kind of, we always say we need a leader in a movement. Is there someone in this WallStreetBets movement that kind of orchestrated this whole thing?
There was that one user who I forget the name, who I think they traced back to really originally pushing the GameStop stock, and he showed his portfolio. He had the stock early. I mean, there's the chairman, who's kind of an amalgamation of these moderators, but it's really kind of an anonymous, non-hierarchical movement. And it's interesting. I think people, if they're smart, they'll be studying it for many years, economically, sociologically. I mean, there's so many angles here to see what went on. It's really an interesting story. And that's why we wanted to make sure we got out and took this, not just from online, not just in the markets, but also expanded on it, had it become a protest in real life. So more attention is focused on this issue, because if they could do this once, they could do it again, and it could be used as a force for change. I think, honestly, the short squeeze, which they did, is the perfect counter to these overshorting of companies. I mean, they were trying to overshort AMC movie theaters into the ground. I mean, this is a company that was struggling to get by, not because of anything bad, but because people couldn't go to the movies. And, when they overshorted them, how can they raise capital? How can they hold themselves over until after the pandemic? They can't. So it's destructive. It's manipulative, all the things they're accusing the Reddit guys of.
Yeah.
And do you know how long it took for them to come up with this plan? Like, was it something that happened like spontaneously, or was it something that took a little bit more of careful organizing?
I think it kind of built over time. Like I said, I think originally it was more of just, this is an undervalued stock that's being shorted. It probably could go up. And then as, buy call options were coming in, the price started to move. I think the dynamics started to change, and this became much more political. And, then when the trading was shut down with Robinhood, I think that was the real tipping point. I think up until then, it was more of a financially driven thing. And then at that point, when they shut down trading, I think a lot of the dynamic changed to be, no, we have to stick it to them. This is about the principle of the matter. And if you think about it, I mean, these guys sacrificed a ton. Some of these guys were sitting on gains, millions possibly. I mean, if they bought this thing at $5, who knows where they ended up, but they were certainly sitting on massive gains. They could have cashed out. They could have bought a home. They could have paid off their student loans. They could have paid off medical bills. Whatever they had to do, they could have really personally gained from it, and they chose to hold, which I think is pretty admirable. And I don't think enough people are talking about that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that right now because it's kind of funny because last night I saw this tweet up there by Mr. Quigley, and it's kind of funny because today you had it in your Twitter feed too as well, and it really talks about who these people are, but more importantly, what the mainstream media and the establishment, how they're trying to frame these guys for who they are. Because you just talked about some of these people could have made a lot of money, but they held on. And that's something upstairs that's making these people go, wait a second. Something inside that's really driving them to anger. But let's just take a look at this little video. You put it up. This is on Mr. Quigley. This was on MSNBC. And this is them trying to smear these people because that's what the establishment does when they don't like when somebody's doing something. They smear the person. Here it is.
Maybe you're learning here. Maybe it's fun, fine. Maybe it's a movement. But be prepared to lose 80 to 90% of it. And if it's still worth it, then have at it. But the biggest loss of capital here will be the human capital of young men who are sitting and staring at their phone and watching the price of Bitcoin or the price of AMC. And ask yourself, would you be better off taking that 1, 2, or 3 hours a day and working out, trying to form relationships with mentors, with romantic relationships, with people at work, getting great at something so you can be the person on the other side of the trade. The greatest loss in capital here is from young men who are more prone to gambling addiction, who don't understand the markets. I think we are setting ourselves up similar to how there's a ton of young women out there who became very depressed by sitting in their rooms looking at Instagram. Self-cutting and self-harm skyrocket. I think you are going to see an explosion in young male depression, and I think a lot of it is going to be reverse engineered to apps that convince you you're part of a movement or physically addict you to your phone. Ask yourself, would your time staring at Robinhood be better spent somewhere else? That is the real capital destruction that is taking place here. Maybe you're learning.
I've been looking at my phone all day. Every single time I look at Ethereum, I tell this guy to go, F you, pal. But listen, you just talked about it. Like, I mean, look how disgusting it is. It's just really, it's one thing he went after guys, then he went after girls too as well. Yeah. It's like he went after all the youth, all the young people in America. What are you doing? You're addicted to your phone. Stop doing this. Let us just rape you over the coals.
He gave you relationship advice in the process.
Get with a loved one, Mario. Gavin. What are you doing here, Gav?
It's such a smug, condescending, arrogant, patronizing view. And that's really the whole view of a lot of these analysts, these pundits who are mostly just really just underwhelming. I mean, they really have nothing to bring to the table. His analysis is a joke. I mean, he kind of twists things. It's kind of like this reverse kind of psychology. It's kind of very devious. He takes maybe some legitimate kernels of truth about society. Yes, there is rising levels of depression. Yes, there is issues with tech and how it impacts people's mental health, et cetera, et cetera. He takes these underlining truths, but then what he does is he ties in something completely unrelated to it as the source of it. And it's so manipulative. It's almost sociopathic to an extent. And like you said, he went after both genders there. And he said, oh, this is the reason these people are depressed. This is the reason they're depressed. And he's trying to create these parallels that people can maybe resonate with. Very, very, very evil genius in a way. But the reality here is that Robinhood is not that at all. I mean, Robinhood was pitched as a way to democratize the markets, to create more transparency, less barriers to entry. You could be waiting tables, you could make a few $100. You want to throw some in a stock, it goes up 50. That's great. It was something you could do on the side. You can make an honest buck off of it. It wasn't something to consume your life over, but he's trying to demean them to be not just unsophisticated, which is what they used to say. Now he's trying to demean them to basically be losers, which is ridiculous. Yeah. Well, and it's so sick. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I just wanted to say the idea that it was just these people dedicate themselves to it. A lot of these Wall Street hedge funds, this is what they do. This is all they do. So to point it out when the little guy is over there doing it for once, using the same recipe, their own medicine against them, it's just extremely, extremely hypocritical.
Yeah.
To call the guy who bankrupted multiple hedge funds and who's probably sitting on $1 million a loser it's kind of rich. I don't know what kind of world we're living in now, but it seems like that guy's a winner. I mean, he did some incredible things. He's going down in history for it, even if people may not know what his name is or what her name is, whatever it is. But the fact that they're trying to just reframe this as it's like this, all these losers, because I know tons of people who got involved on this, tons of people who were just, not involved really with Wall Street Bets. They joined in later, not really involved politically. And they've been, woken up to a lot of things that's been going on in our society for a while. And they're all normal, well-adjusted people. Everyone I know who has bought in to this whole meme stock, GameStop phenomenon, normal, good people. None of them had any issues. I mean, I think the people that have issues are the ones that go on CNBC and start crying crocodile tears because they finally lost money on the markets.
Yeah. Well, you also talked about some of these people hold on to the stock. They could have cashed it out, made a lot of money and whatnot. But there seems to be some type of driving force inside some of these people. Why are these investors or these Redditors so damn angry? Why are they mad? Because let's be honest right now. Let's not sugarcoat it. This looked like this was a specific targeted hit going after these hedge funds, and it seems like there's a little payback. Why are they so angry?
Well, I think to bring it back to what the schmuck said earlier is that, there are a lot of angry, depressed people. We have a lost generation on our hands, whether people want to admit it or not. I mean, if you look at the culture, you look at what's going on, you look at the economy, this is probably one of the first, generations that's really just not going to do as well as the previous. I mean, their purchasing power is lower. Their ability to, make money is lower. They're not going to live as a well-off a life as their parents or their grandparents did. So I think there's a lot of people that just don't realize what's bubbling under the surface. And there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of just frustration. There's a lot of broken promises. There's a lot of people feeling like they're not living to the most of their potential. And this is a society-wide thing. And then you finally get this instrument that comes around and it enables them to start making money, to start, sitting at the big boy table, so to speak, and they see massive financial gains from it, and now they're getting vilified even more, and they're getting put down more, and they're trying to shut down this new avenue that could have allowed them to kind of elevate themselves financially, economically, whatever it is. So I think it's basically people that have already established. It's almost like a generational conflict, because there is definitely a demographic component here, and it's definitely younger people. Mm-hmm. And I think they're very much angry at a system that's basically lied to them, that's given them false hope, that's told them things that ended up not being true. They're saddled with debt. They have, they're starting out life with essentially a mortgage, but they don't actually have a house. They don't have the job opportunities they thought they were going to have. And why wouldn't you be depressed if that was your station in life? Why wouldn't you be angry? Why wouldn't you be looking? And then the people that tried to do something to rectify it, they always tell them smugly, "Oh, pick yourself up by your bootstraps." These guys did. They researched the market, they made money, and now they're getting slapped down. So I think this is going to get worse before it gets better if this kind of rhetoric from that guy continues.
So are they planning on striking again? And will there be anything that could potentially stop them? Could the SEC stop them, or Wall Street? How far is this movement willing to go? Because I think if it continues, I think more people might also continue to join in.
I think that's what the powers that be are worried about. And I think they're doing some kind of psyops. I think they're directing people wrongly into things like Dogecoin, which is a worthless coin that is not, there's no one on the other end of that transaction. That's not a zero-sum transaction. The zero-sum transaction was the short squeezer pushing against the short seller. There is one loser and there is one winner. Dogecoin doesn't have that. The commodity market with the silver, that's another distraction. So I think there's active efforts right now to redirect some of this some of this capital and all these financial resources, some of these angers into kind of fruitless endeavors. But I think they've mastered doing it once. They can do it again. And I think right now what we're seeing is that Wall Street and the SEC and the Janet Yellens of the world are going to start working in overtime to introduce new rules, new regulations that are going to block this kind of thing from happening, that are going to try to criminalize it. They're going to try to penalize it, and they're going to really change the rules of the game. So I think it's a kind of against the clock right now if they can find other assets that kind of meet the criteria, because this was a very specific criteria. They had GameStop, which was overshorted 50% over float, which is 50% more than there are actually stocks out there. I mean, that was basically just asking to be short squeezed, and they lost billions as a consequence. So if they can find something like that again, I think sometimes they're going to need some information that comes from people with Bloomberg terminals and other things. So they need some kind of quote unquote inside information to really act on it effectively, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. Let's talk about where the movement goes from here, because what you did was you tried to reboot, or you are rebooting the Occupy Wall Street movement. I always talked about that. That was a movement from the left that was once started. I think a lot of Bernie Sanders people were out there the other day for you. There's a lot of those Bernie Sanders people were out there and down in Occupy Wall Street years ago. You're a Republican, though. How do we bridge that divide between people on opposite sides of the political spectrum?
Well, as I said down there, and I think everyone sort of agreed, I think this was kind of a universal red meat issue. We, maybe if we get into the weeds on policy, there will eventually be some disagreements, but we'll cross that bridge when we have to cross it. In the meantime, we can all join forces and expose the corruption, the criminality, the lack of transparency, the double standards, all these horrible things that is going on in this rigged system. And if we can do that together, that's really the first battle. But I think a lot of times what's been happening is we kind of squabble amongst ourselves and we get into semantics and we get into the weeds, and we don't really see that, us just, bickering at each other is only helping them. And I think they've done a really good job at divide and conquer, because I think there is a lot of shared sentiment. I think there's a lot of shared frustration. I think, a lot of people do want the same outcome, but they may have different ways to get there. And that's what we saw down there. I mean, there were people that were far, far to my left. There were people in the middle. There were people to the right. It was a whole motley crew. It was a real New York, assembly, so to speak. It was a bunch of characters, and, but we had a coherent message, and the message was, and we were on the right side here. We have the moral high ground, was that this is completely unjustifiable what they're doing. And, we saw it. And honestly, with even Occupy 10 years ago, I would have said the same thing. I mean, when they bailed out the big banks, I mean, I would never have supported that. If they were part of this kind of synergy between the Fed and Wall Street that destroyed our economy, and then they wanted to get bailed out for it. I think it's pure corporatism, and I think people need to realize that if we're going to talk about terms or semantics, I think that's what really we're up against in many ways.
There's a juxtaposition right now between what you're saying and what's going on in the country, because you live in Queens. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a very popular senator or congresswoman. Thank God, not senator yet.
Not yet.
I'm a leftist, but I get really turned off when people on the right consider her a radical, because to me, she's not. She behaves very much like a corporate neoliberal establishment Democrat, and she didn't used to. She went in a different way, attacking the ruling class, and now she's shifted her stance. And my point in bringing this up is the fact that people like her are extremely bent on dividing this whole idea that insurrectionists attack the Capitol, and now we have to go after every Republican in Congress that brought up election fraud and all of this. Simultaneously, while that's going on in the Democratic Party, we're seeing a unification of different kinds of working people across the ideologies. We interviewed somebody that was a Boogaloo boy not that long ago, that was for Black Lives Matter, that was pro LGBTQ, but simply, had some more libertarian point of views on certain things involving government, which is usually the difference between us and some people. I like more social safety nets, etc., but I don't like big government. So what we're seeing is these two things coming together. What do you think needs to happen to reach a post-partisan gathering of the working class? Do you think we're at that breaking point, that tipping point? Because the millennial generation, the Gen Z generation, as you said, are feeling the weight of the economic failures of this society. So is there a possibility for unity in that? Or do you think the powers that be are doing an excellent job of dividing us further apart?
So many great points there. I do think there's an element of, the working class is kind of back against the wall, and, you have to really start to make some compromises and some pragmatic solutions. And you see charlatans like AOC and Elizabeth Warren, who, if they really cared about effectuating positive change, they would have seen this opportunity and they would have ran with it. But instead, they found excuses to be obstructionists while, self-aggrandizing and drawing attention to themselves. I think Warren is even worse in many regards, because she didn't even do a good job of it. Yeah. She just basically put out a statement saying the Reddit guys are bad. I don't like price volatility. It's like, so since when do leftists care that stock prices fluctuate? I mean, on what planet is anyone caring about that? The price fluctuates all the time. Now they care. It's rich. But I think there are these controlled opposition figures that may at one point been genuine, but they've obviously been co-opted by, to use Trump's language, the swamp. And that's a real fact. That's a real thing. I mean, power, money, fame, they all kind of corrupt. So if you're given a lot of it, and I think AOC's biggest problem is that she's been turned into like this celebrity. And when you've been elevated to that level of stardom and fame, you're never going to operate at the same level as other people. You're always going to be, there's going to be some natural inclinations to more self-interest, to perpetuate the fame, and you kind of lose sight of maybe your original views and values. I've come out and defended AOC when applicable. I've always hated the stupid talking point making fun of her for formerly being a waitress or bartender. Right. And, when she has said stuff good, I mean, even Rashida Tlaib came out and was pushing back against this new kind of, police state that was emerging. I gave her credit, and I disagree with her on a lot. So I'm not trying to be obstructionist. I'll vote for them when there was the direct stimulus stuff. I supported it, and they wanted to work with us too. But the problem is that there are the powers that be, to the second part of your question, that are playing everyone kind of like puppets, and they love this sort of division. They love the distractions. I think wokeism is a big part of this. I talked about this with some people down there. I mean, if it was merely just economic issues and we had some differences on policy, I think there would be a lot more cross-party unity, which we see sometimes in other countries, which we've seen historically. But I think there's like this new kind of religion and cult of wokeism that just kind of vilifies and demonizes anyone who's like to the right of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like you said earlier, like labeling everyone a white nationalist, whoever. And it's just a blocker, and it just prevents anything meaningful from happening. And until people can wake up and start pushing past that and getting real, we're going to be stuck in this kind of gerbil wheel, just running in place.
Yeah. Well, let me finish out the show by saying this much, too, as well, because I know you're going to get vetted right now from a lot of our watchers and people who follow us, whatnot. They always do that. We have anybody on the other side of the aisle, forget about it.
Yeah.
And I've gone through your Twitter, obviously, whatnot, and I think what you're doing right now is awesome. I love what you had to say at your speech. But I also do want to point out one thing that I did take issue with, because I believe this is a mechanism from the elites. The same people who shut down Robinhood and had the ability to do what they did this past week are the same people who want us to get involved with that divide and conquer situation. And I've seen a lot of people on the left constantly playing the insurrection or the breach or whatever you want to call it, whatnot, and trying to frame Trumpers as domestic terrorists who took over the Capitol, whatnot. But also I see some people on the right, even on the populist right, that show a lot of BLM protesters, whatnot, and kind of refer to them as rioters or people who kind of start stuff up. So I just wanted to point that out, that I think that I am encouraging people to take those things down, because I believe that both sides going at each other, when the little man or the common man or the common man or the common woman point the finger at each other and say, hey man, look at that BLM protester over there, they're rioting, look at that Trumper over there, they're a domestic terrorism, and only adds fuel to that fire. And I'm just saying this because you could tell me that you're just a stupid schmuck, take a walk, pasta, or you could take my advice and stuff like that, because I really think I love what you have to say, and I love you bringing that unity together, saying right people and left people got to come together. But that is one issue I take with when I see some people on the right and the populist right kind of framing that. Do you have any thoughts on that, or would you even consider, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would ask you to consider that, like I've told people on the left, take down the whole thing saying that Trumpers are domestic terrorists, take down any type of kind of post that say that BLMers are rioters, because the majority, and we go out to these protests, Gavin, and we know it's not a monolithic group. You know, you can have people just, nobody is. Same thing with the Trump thing. Yeah. Most of the people we met there on the Capitol building on the 6th were loving people. So that framing, so my advice to you, or just to put it out there, being a person who stepped forward and wants to take this to the next level, will we consider kind of moving away from those type of rhetoric, and your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm changing. I'm never set in stone with my views. I used to be more of a socialist myself. I was very, very much on the Democratic side of things. I change my views constantly. I'm always open to new ideas. I think one thing that I am kind of immovable on is I am a free speech absolutist. So Absolutely. You're protesting peacefully and you're letting your voices be heard. I could disagree with you, but I'll let you do your thing. I think what's making us so divided and unhealthy is that they've shut down debate and discourse, because if you break bread with people, it's very hard for you to demonize them, and it's very hard for you to hate them, because and first of all, I grew up in New York, so everyone I knew was left wing. Everyone I knew was to the left of me, and I had no problem being friends with them. I do think in recent years that started to change. But listen, if BLM is protesting peacefully, there's no problem. If Trump people are protesting peacefully, there's no problem. Obviously, there's always going to be bad eggs. Those bad eggs should be called out. And if they are called out, then you'll never have a situation where things ever get out of hand, because I feel like sometimes on both sides they'll excuse the bad behavior of a few bad eggs and it's kind of partisan loyalty, but then that just creates a situation where it just becomes legitimate and it gets out of hand. But look, if you're protesting peacefully and you're with BLM, do your thing. It happens all the time in New York. I mean, I see it all the time. I've been at these BLM protests. I've seen people. I know people have gone to them. I've talked to them. I mean, I think, and look, I also come from a kind of a libertarian background. I kind of went from socialist to libertarian, and one of my big shticks for a while was very anti-police state, and I still kind of hold that. I'm for law and order, but I'm against the police state. And I think there was actually the thing just happened in Rochester where the little girl, 9 years old, she got pepper sprayed in the backseat. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. I'll call that out. That should be fully prosecuted, litigated, the whole thing. I have no problem doing that. And I do think there is this tendency with the way things are going now that you want to be on your teams and you got to hide behind your team wall, and it's killing the kind of middle ground. And that's what I think they're scared of most, is that, if there is that middle ground where people can kind of talk and actually go into nuance. I think nuance is dead. That's the problem. Everything's such black and white, so stark contrasts. And, I think most people aren't aligned with that. I think the vast majority of people are kind of floating somewhere, all over the place. They get views here, they have views there. They're not really kind of marching in lockstep with everyone. But listen, I mean, if I've put out stuff in the past, I'm willing to reevaluate it on a case-by-case basis. But generally speaking, I have no problem with peaceful protest. I have no problem with people marching. I have no problem with what they're doing if it's done, right. But again, I do. But there has been violence. I have seen violence and that I condemn. I've seen also maybe not violence, but things like doxing and like there's the more of the online component, which I think is worse than what happens sometimes in person, because there's this kind of like it's this more insidious, because it kind of they go after people's livelihoods and jobs, and I think that's getting into scary territory.
I mean, I would agree. And just to, you said you wanted to finish off the show, but you said you're a free speech absolutist. I consider myself one of those as well. Julian Assange is in Belmarsh prison right now. He is literally in prison for exposing our imperialism, our war crimes, right? Is there a relationship that you think that exists? Because because I am against the police state, I also think that there needs to be something done with the police. We were talking to somebody that was a cop for 27 years, and we interviewed him, and he said, defund the police is not a good word for it, but he was talking about reimagine the police or something else, like police shouldn't have the ability to investigate themselves. Do you believe the police should have the ability to investigate themselves? Because that seems kind of like a contradiction to me. And as much as we do want a society that has some sort of order, there does seem to be a discrepancy with with how the police state operates, like foreign policy wise, and then they come here and they also tend to do that. I mean, right now we're seeing when we were at the Capitol at DC, we saw the police actually go after several Trump supporters, and the Trump supporters were like, well then fuck you then, like okay fine, like, so I think there's like the police state, and the police are an extension of many of the problems that we have, whether it's the Pentagon, whether it's this national security state. What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of great points. First, obviously, I wanted Assange pardoned. He's a criminal he's been criminalized by the state for going against them. He's a political prisoner. That was the word I was looking for. Excuse me. Him, Snowden, everyone. They all should have been fine. They should have been let out of jail. And I'm in total lockstep with you guys on that. As far as the police state stuff, listen, I agree. I think there's a few factors at work here. I think we have a society that over criminalizes a lot of things, and I think you guys, what happens is that the police get put as the middleman between these legislators and and these governments who are just basically, going nuts with their crazy laws. They have systems of quotas. They need to hit certain numbers, and it puts these guys, many of whom are working class themselves, and are just trying to do right by their communities and trying to actually fight real criminals who do exist. And they're getting put instead on doing basically, they're just the fee collectors for the state, and they're just basically enforcing stupid rules that help line the pockets of bureaucrats. So I think there's part of that at work. I also think there's been this situation where there has been some kind of glorification of actual criminals, and it's created this tension where the cops feel threatened, the criminals feel emboldened, and it just makes things much worse. I think handle on a case-by-case basis when there are instances of abuses. Absolutely, I don't think it should be done by a third party. I mean, if the police want to do their own investigation, sure, but that shouldn't be the final one. That shouldn't be the unilateral one. There should be a third party investigating. And I also have difficulty sometimes myself, because I think the New York City Police Department is different. I do know that there are departments elsewhere across the country that operate very differently and are much more that are probably have a lot of issues with them, and they definitely are operating on a different level. But I know here in New York there is the Civilian Complaint Review Board. There are mechanisms there to review these things, and they are adjudicated and they are investigated. So of course I think it should be a third party. I don't think any entity should be investigating themselves. I don't want Robin Hood investigating themselves.
Yeah, right.
I don't want Wall Street investigating themselves. It should be done by a third party. But then again, you have to get into the details. Like, how is that, whatever that body, how's it going to be structured? How's it going to work? I mean, those have to be hashed out in detail. But yes, theoretically, it should always be a third party investigating it, something impartial. I mean, that's how we have the courts. I mean, it should be modeled based on the courts, obviously maybe expedited and stuff, because it's not a legal process, but fully on board with that. And I do think we need to move away from this, the militarization of the police. I mean, some of these police, they're basically like mini armies. I don't think that's right. I think if we return more local for a lot of these things, like local safety nets, more local policing, more tied in with the community, I think the police officers should live in the city. I mean, I don't like the fact that you have, police officers commuting into the city. I don't like politicians living outside of the city. So if you're going to police the city, you should live in the city. If you're going to govern the city, you should live in the city. So there's lots of things like that I would fully get on board. I agree with whoever you were talking to about the defund language. I think it's stupid. I don't think that helps anybody. And I think the people that have been hurt the most by this anti-police rhetoric have been inner city, largely minority communities who suffer the most from crime. I mean, a lot of times I see it's kind of like this upper middle class white liberal, tweeting from their, their doorman apartments, about screw the police, defund it, but they're not the people that, are scared to walk between their building and the subway. They're not the people who actually see crime. They don't see the gangs. They don't see all this stuff. And I think that's lost in the weeds, because I think a lot of people have used the police issue to virtue signal. I think they've used it just to kind of feel righteous themselves without actually looking. It's like, okay, well, what's actually going to happen? Because unless you're like an anarchist and you don't want any form of order, what exactly is your solution to these rising rapes? What is your solution to rising murder? I mean, you need to have a balance, and I think we can get there. I think a lot of countries have gotten there. If you look at other countries' crime, I mean, it's doable. It's not like some theoretical. So yeah, that's where I'm on. That's where I'm at.
Gavin, those white saviors with their Twitter, they'll go out there and tweet everything, but it doesn't really affect them. They get their lattes and stuff. He's got a great shtick. He ain't no schmuck. Gavin Mario Wax with us here, young Republican New York, rebooting the Occupy Wall Street movement. Tell everybody where they can see you, where they can find you, and watch your show or listen to your show.
Thank you, man. And you can follow me at Gavin Wax, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the whole deal. And you can follow the Waxcast _podcast on Twitter. And we're on Google, iTunes, Apple, same thing, Stitcher, Spotify. So check us out. I need to actually get some more people who are of a different political persuasion than me on the show. I think it'll make it a lot more interesting. So that's the next step.
Yeah, the conversations to be had between us would be interesting, especially me, because I'm not the fondest of the police, to put it lightly, but I would be willing to have an argument or a debate with somebody that feels like the police have been maligned. The more this process has been going, I've been seeing the police as stormtroopers. The people that carry out the orders. The people in power are the ones that are really the ones that we need to go after. And so it would be interesting to have a sort of debate with somebody that, I think we could agree on economic issues. It's the social issues where we would definitely differ. But I think those conversations need to be had in front of an audience so people can hear them. I don't think it needs to be silenced. I don't think I should be only speaking to my echo chamber. Right?
Agreed,
So,
and I think that's how ideas get refined and they get improved, and you fill in the gaps. And I mean, I agree with you. I do think. I mean, I would say scapegoated for a lot of the police stuff, because if they're enforcing laws that, like, there was that one thing with the there was this woman who would sell the I forgot the name of the food on the subway platforms, and the cops had to drag her out, and it was like, the cops basically went out and they said, listen, like, we don't want to arrest her for selling the churros or whatever it was. It's like, you guys voted for this dumb law. Like, if you guys just get rid of it, we won't do it. We won't be pressured. Like, we have to. They have to do their job, and it's annoying. I also think with all the economic issues that are happening, a lot of people are being driven into crime. A lot of people are suffering. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration. And then who's the front line of dealing with that? It's the cops. So they're the first people that are going to witness whatever's changing on the ground before it obviously hits the doorman building and the upper middle class white liberal. But I mean, it's there's a lot of things at play, and I think they get caught in the crosshairs, and I think it needs to be looked like at systemically, because there is rising crime, there is a lot of issue with just chaos in society. And the cops are obviously the first people who are going to be engaged with it. And there may be some overuse of force, or maybe whatever. But if we just blame them, you're never going to solve the issue. It's just going to make it worse. There needs to be, like, looking at all the other factors that are involved.
Yeah, that's Gavin Mario Wax. Hey, when you want to have some leftists on to talk about election integrity on your show, we're here, baby. We're ready to talk about it, man.
I wish you guys were the Democratic Party. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we have no choices. I mean, I could never bring myself to support the Democrats, because they wouldn't have a conversation like this, and they wouldn't be open to things, at least not now, maybe 10, 20 years ago. But if you guys were the majority of that party and ran that party, I mean, I think tons of people like me would vote Democrat.
Yeah, well, maybe we will one day. I doubt, but maybe we'll just start our own. Maybe we can go gold back to the Libertarian Party and change it. Gavin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It really was a treat. Let's get together soon, have you on. We can have a nice fiery talking about Medicare for all. That would be fun, right? Ooh.
Healthcare would be good, yeah.
We'll talk about that. Hey, go visit the guy, check out his podcast, check out his Twitter, and let's have these conversations. Thanks for joining us again today.